The economic impacts of COVID-19 have been far-reaching, driving many Americans into debt and some into poverty. A large part of the president's $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan will provide a safety net for millions of lower-income Americans. To help answer questions about the economic impacts, let's bring in Joe Minarik. He is the Senior Vice President and Director of Research at the Committee for Economic Development, and he was also the Chief Economist of the Office of Management and Budget during the Clinton administration. Joe, good to have you with us. You actually spoke with us in January about the Biden administration's concern that there's more risk in going too low on the economic relief package than going too high. As an economist, what's your take on this final relief plan as it was passed?
Well, it was clear there was a need to do something. We definitely had an underage of support for unemployment compensation. As you know, we are running down to the last days under the previous legislation. We're probably going to have some interruptions in unemployment compensation for some individuals. Hopefully, they'll get retrospective payments, so they'll be caught up. But that being said, this is a big bill. It is far-reaching. It takes a number of policy orientations that are not necessarily responsive to the pandemic so much as they are freestanding anti-poverty measures. We're going to have to judge that on the basis of whether they prove to be affordable. And also, many of these provisions are temporary in the law, and there's a question about whether they will be allowed to expire. We'll have to wait and see on that one.
Well, I want to follow up on this issue because we heard the president announce the profound impact that this bill will have on poverty. Can you explain, both in terms of the president's belief that this will help especially lift so many children out of poverty, and going to that other point that you raised, that this isn't supposed to be necessarily a long-term plan, that most of the provisions have sunset clauses in them. Am I right?
Yes, there are credits that exist in the current law that go to children unconditionally and that go to families who have child care expenses, also expenses for care for elderly or indigent family members. So those provisions are being beefed up substantially, but that's for 1 year. And when the year is over, those provisions are set to expire. They have a very important impact, a very substantial impact on the poverty status of families with children. The question is, with the very large budget deficits that we have now, can we maintain those provisions? And that goes along with some other provisions with respect to assistance for mortgage payments, for rent payments, for food assistance, for water bills, which will be helpful to families that are unemployed. And of course, there are other provisions that expand unemployment benefits. Those are time limited as well. So a lot of this is of substantial benefit for a period of time. The goal is to get the economy moving again and to get people back to work. But if that isn't accomplished when these things expire, some people will be saying that they need to be made permanent, and that will only come with a cost.
Well, tell us what you'll be looking for in terms of its impact on the economy. And is it possible to predict how long we'll continue to see economic impacts from the pandemic and from this relief bill?
The major impact on the economy has been, and this is unique in economic downturns in modern U.S. economic history. The major impact is on service businesses, leisure, hospitality, dining out, travel, retail, places where people do not feel comfortable going because of the proximity to other people and the possibility of catching the disease. What we are going to be looking for is the opportunity for the people who lost jobs in those industries. And in many instances, you're talking about people who do not necessarily have sophisticated technical skills. They are not necessarily easily transferable workers into other industries. Some of the firms that, some restaurants, some retail establishments, and so forth, have closed their doors permanently. And so there's going to be a question of how fast that service sector of the economy will be able to recover. And we're going to need that recovery so that many of those individuals can get back to work. You know, it would be great if we could take those people and give them sophisticated training so they could move on. That's a very difficult thing to do. It's going to take a lot of work to get to the point where we are capable of doing that. So for now, we're going to have to get those people back into places of business, many of which have suffered very badly in this downturn, many of which have closed their doors. We're going to have to get those businesses open again, get people going out, get people traveling, using hotels, going to retail stores, so that that part of the economy can get back on its feet. And because this downturn hit that sector of the economy so hard, we need a recovery in that part of the economy, and that's going to be difficult to achieve.
And Joe, what about the country's growing debt and concerns about inflation? How will this impact us in the long run?
Just because this legislation was necessary does not mean that it is without consequences. In medical science, we give people drugs. We operate on people where there are side effects, where there are risks, because the treatment is necessary. Well, likewise, this is a radical treatment for the economy. It is piling up debt, and that debt will have consequences. It has to be serviced. We are already seeing financial markets react to some extent to the additional load of debt. Treasury yields are beginning to move up. They're still very low historically, but they're up by a noticeable level over 3-4 months ago. Part of that is a natural reaction to an economic recovery. When the economy recovers and people are more optimistic, they're more willing to borrow money. When there's more demand for credit, that tends to drive interest rates up. Interest rates rise also when people are concerned about the possibility of inflation. And inflation also follows economic growth to some extent. As the economy is growing, there's competition for workers. People start to bid against one another to hire workers to get them onto the payroll so that they can increase their production to meet demand. So we are in a process where there will be a self-reinforcing circular tendency towards higher inflation and higher interest rates. It is still an incredibly competitive economy out there. The fact that we are trading around the world means that many businesses will say, I can't raise prices because if I do, somebody else is going to come in and compete against me and eat my lunch. And that tends to hold the rate of inflation down. But when you get to the point where demand is rising within the United States and around the world, there will begin to be some pressures to raise prices, at least somewhat. Along with that goes an increase in interest rates. Along with that goes an increase in the federal government's interest bill. And our debt right now is about as high as it has ever been in the entire history of the Republic. Relative to the size of our economy, the economy is the income flow out of which we have to pay the interest. So we're getting that pressure, and it will have an economic effect eventually, and we'll have to be prepared for it, and we'll have to react to that.
So, Joe, really quickly, if we're thinking about this as emergency experimental surgery on our nation's economy, which was flatlining, is the prognosis good?
We are beginning to see an economic recovery in that class of service workers in leisure and hospitality and retail. There has been some pickup of employment. It's still very much only a small share of the total, but it's moving in a total of what we lost, but it's moving in the right direction. That is a good sign. There is some momentum. The What we heard earlier this evening is absolutely right. We have got to get this pandemic beaten, or else it could conceivably reverse that progress. But we're making progress now. If we are disciplined, if we continue to follow good practices as the vaccine rolls out, we have the chance for people to go back to shopping and for the people who work in those establishments to go back to work. So we're moving in the right
Mhm.
direction. We need to stay on our guard and we need to prepare for the possibility of beginning to reopen our economy when that becomes possible and safe.
All right, Joe Minarik, thank you.